South Africa's cultural wealth comes alive on this Heritage Day every year. But what is the deeper significance of Heritage Day? Author Fred Khumalo joins us now to look at our linguistic heritage and the role of literature in preserving it. Thanks, Fred, very much for your time speaking to us today. So we are a nation of storytellers, and for centuries our narratives were passed on orally. Have all our stories in all our languages been safely captured in written form for future generations?
Thank you for the opportunity. We have a beautiful constitution that ensures the protection and promotion of our languages. However, we're starting from a position of weakness as those of us who speak in the indigenous languages, because they're not well resourced. I know we have an organization, Pencil, that is doing sterling work in trying to promote them, but I don't think enough is being done. There are writers who are writing in their home languages, but they struggle to find publishers, mainly because publishers are looking for stories that will fit the school's market, which makes commercial sense for them, because it's the chain. The chain is such that the booksellers themselves are not interested in books in the indigenous languages because they say there's no market.
Yeah.
So it's a very frustrating process for a writer who wants to read his or her readers in language, the language of his preference.
Fred, and there's no market because despite our love of stories, we're not a nation of avid readers. Why is that, and how do we change that?
I think a market could be cultivated if there could be a willingness on the part of the booksellers to say, let us take a risk and open our shelves to these books, which are being produced here and there, as and when a publisher thinks this book could sell in an indigenous language. To prove this, if you look at publishing in indigenous languages, in newspaper publishing in indigenous languages, it is thriving, which proves to me that there is therefore a market that could be explored through those existing channels, the newspapers themselves. However, that hasn't been explored. So I hope that this clarion call will be taken up by the booksellers, who then will influence the book publishers to say, take the writers in indigenous languages seriously, because there are people eager to tell these stories.
Yeah. Does self-publishing and the digital space open up opportunities for writers and readers to meet each other halfway without the necessity for the middleman, this bookseller?
That has helped a lot. The opening up of the internet and self-publishing has helped a lot, because whenever I go out to book festivals and all that, a lot of young guys are self-publishing because they've been frustrated by the rejection that they get from the established publishing industry. So that is a great intervention, but we need that to be expanded. But it's a very important intervention made by self-published writers and, of course, the internet.
So when I talk about stories, I'm not just talking about the importance of fiction, biographies, historical accounts, official records. All of these, in my opinion, count as our stories. How strong is our non-fiction culture in South Africa?
Our non-fiction is in a stronger state than our fiction. Books of non-fiction, be it in English, Afrikaans, or isiZulu, or any other language, are likely to sell more. That is an established fact. Because I think reality TV, the series that you get from Netflix and other platforms, cater for the more imaginative side of storytelling, your fictional mode. So as a result, those of us who write fiction suffer in that sense, but also write a non-fiction. So non-fiction is in a stronger position, but it can't be held, especially in our indigenous languages. I'm amazed that there is not a single biography of such a personality as Richard Maponya, either in English or in any of the indigenous languages. And there are many illustrious personalities, achievers, and characters, and influential people in the Black community whose stories would resonate with many, would inspire many, but still haven't been written. So it's a challenge for writers, publishers, and booksellers to explore those hidden pockets of opportunity.
Fred, how are writers doing? Perhaps lockdown was for them not so disastrous in the sense that they can do their work everywhere. But in general, we've seen a decline in publishing. We've seen many newspapers having to shut their doors, magazines shutting their doors. And it's a very sad day. So what are the prospects for South African writers?
Rather bleak, I must admit, because I've been involved in two recently published books. The one was on lockdown, stories about lockdown. We couldn't, obviously, because the bookstores were still closed, we couldn't sell that book. So I can imagine, I don't have the figures, I can imagine that the figures haven't been very good. However, the online version, the ebook version of the book has done pretty well. So creative thinking on the part of the publisher has helped. However, traditional book selling and book publishing has suffered. Sales have suffered because people have been holed up in their homes. They couldn't go out. They couldn't go to the bookstores. So a walk-in traffic at bookstores would have suffered. So that had a major blow on writers' lives, because when we get our royalties next year, such as they are, it would be even bleaker than it already is.
And Fred, are other platforms, and is the technology there for writers to still make a living off online sales?
You see, writing books, whether non-fiction or fiction, is a long-drawn process. So there are other ways of making a living as a writer, shorter forms of writing, like journalism. That's how I make my living. I also write people's speeches. It's a form of writing. And I write PR. I do PR for people. That's another form of writing. That's how I make my living. But if you rely solely on books, forget it. It's tough. It's tough. It was tough even before lockdown. It's going to be tougher after lockdown, because the effects of lockdown will only be felt in the next few months or the next year in terms of sales and royalties and so on. So writers out there have to be creative. They have to explore other ways of making a living from their talent or from their skills.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to speaking to us. That was author Fred Khumalo on this heritage.